here, we're queer, and we got mixed reviews.
We do. Well done.
Oh my god, I just came up with that right now. I did not practice that.
That, it rhymes too.
Mhm.
I can't imagine where that came from in your head, Louie. How do you work things
smart. out? God, it's really hard being me, you know?
Yeah, I can see that. That was much meaner than it was.
Sure.
I'm Gavin.
I'm Louie.
And this is the Mixed Reviews. Welcome, everybody. I'm always try and live by the rule that every episode of a podcast is someone's first episode of a podcast.
Oh, okay.
So here at the Mixed Reviews, this is a podcast where we take a person in the film community, be them an actor or filmmaker, mostly actors and filmmakers.
Yes, correct.
And we look at some of the highs of their careers and some of the lows of their careers.
Yeah, we just do a deep dive into all the stuff they've been doing, and then we talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk shit, get hit.
And so this week we decided to. I like where we're going. I like that we're not sticking inside any boxes.
Yeah, I think we on our list we had written down this guy's name, and we're like, when will we do this? And so today we're talking about Hayao Miyazaki.
Correct. I do want to give just a general warning beforehand. I don't know how good Louie is at pronouncing things. I can't pronounce things in English.
Uh-huh.
So this episode is going to be a real challenge. Please forgive me, any Japanese speaking people, whether it's your first language or second language.
But also just tweet Gavin that he's a fucking idiot.
Exactly.
For the rest of eternity.
So I'll just be sitting here in a corner with a giant dunce cap and just I'm the smartest man in the world.
It's Miyazaki.
But yeah, this was a really fascinating one. This is an interesting challenge.
I was telling some friends of the show, this is the first time I think I got some fatigue watching all these movies, and I don't know why, because for the most part he makes really good movies and they're enjoyable, but they are so dense.
Yeah.
And so these are not movies that just you can put on and kind of not really, you need to invest in these movies, because they're so layered and you miss a lot from just,
Well, that's, you texted me, during the second week, because we take 2 weeks for every episode, and, you said the thing that is the most true, which is these are not bingeable films.
No.
And they're really not.
I was like, oh, I watched one movie today. Usually I'll watch 2 a day. I was like, today I cannot watch any more of this. And it's just these are complicated movies, it's not just and it's crazy. And this is maybe my ignorance. I don't know how you feel about this, but these are not American movies. And, the things he's done.
Miyazaki's not an American.
I know, it's crazy. Spoiler alert, plot twist. Mr. Miyazaki is not American, Japanese filmmaker.
Yes.
And, his movies are just just very, very that. It's hard to, and again, when we were watching his movies, a lot of them don't take place in Japan. And
right.
I remember as a child watching these movies, could not wrap my brain around this. Seeing these English, places. Italy comes up a lot in his movies.
Yeah.
And I'm just but the style of animation is very Japanese, and just feeling I was in a magical place seeing these kind of bringing together of cultures, which is insane because obviously I've seen American movies where they're set in whatever. But, there's something about, when I was a child watching these movies, and being what is this? This is insane, Disney was not making movies like this.
No, and that's the interesting thing about his career. For those who don't know, and I'll get into some slight biographical information in a moment, but he makes animated films. He starts with the storyboard process. There's a really great documentary called The Kingdom of Madness and Dreams.
Yep.
And if you can find it, it's all about his work on what was... Mm-hmm. But we'll get to this later. But what was his final film, The Wind Rises?
Yeah.
And
it's insane because the filmmaker of that movie, she got a year to Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
And it just turned out that year he announced his retirement, and so it was a good point in his career to look back and kind of really show how he grew this insane empire that is beloved worldwide.
Yeah. And but what I was going to get at is that I feel like he's often unfairly compared to Walt Disney.
Mm-hmm.
I think the movies he makes, and this is not a knock at Disney. Disney's very good at making the movies they do. The movies he makes are much more complex than that.
They don't feel like they need to like hold anyone's hand. Like,
right.
And I think his movies, they fall into two things. They're either like epic dramas or they're like more kid movies, you know? That's how I see it. I mean, maybe I'm not like using the right words for that, but some are this really huge, sweeping, like out of this world, crazy, magical. And then other ones still have some of that feel to it, but it's also like for children.
Yeah.
And they're lighter and sweeter and they don't feel like the stakes aren't nearly as high.
No.
But they usually end with a really cute song. And I love them.
And what's really nice about that too is he's able to sort of move back and forth between those like childlike wonder and very adult sort of style of storytelling without ever being condescending. And I think that's what's really interesting as an American looking at his film, the body of work is that nothing is really black and white in Miyazaki's world. And perhaps that's because he is, he grew up during the Second World War. And so he's had those experiences and there's a lot more depth to his characters. There's a lot more depth to the worlds that he creates. No one is purely evil or purely good. They're driven by, needs and wants. The closest he gets to that was that weirdly later in his career. And I'll get to that when we start talking about the films. But for the most part, he creates these really three-dimensional, non-black and white. Like there's nothing ever like pure good or pure evil in his
sometimes
films.
Like not much happens. He takes a lot of time just like lingering in moments and like you kind of just get this like nice like
which is something you never get in animation.
I mean, it feels like when we look at good, like quote good Disney movies, it's like wow, what a tight movie! Like the plot keeps going, and I'm never bored because things keep on happening. Whereas in his movies, it's like I never was bored, but like you're just like you're seeing wind blow or like water separate, and
I was bored once, but I'm gonna we'll get to that
once minimum. But yeah, it's a friend even said she was like. They would never make these movies in America.
No.
Like, I don't think anyone would have, like, there was no one in Hollywood that was like, yes, let's throw lots of money at this, like, story about little kids doing nothing.
Well, I mean, even a good comparison, like, if you want to challenge yourself, look at The Little Mermaid versus Ponyo. Ponyo is not one of my favorite of his films, but it is loosely based on the same legend, and their version of Little Mermaid's also loosely based on, the Hans Christian Andersen, I guess it's not a legend because it's actually a story, but the Hans Christian Andersen story, and like see the directions that he takes versus the directions that Disney takes. Now, admittedly, like that's not Walt Disney, that's just a company, but,
correct.
But still, like it's a really interesting, like there's no other of his films that have that sort of American counterpart that you can kind of compare the two.
Yeah, and I think he's very interested in like nature and beauty, and like he's a huge pacifist, and like in Kingdom of Madness and Magic, is that right?
Kingdom of Madness and Dreams.
Madness and Dreams. He's literally showing the filmmaker all these photos of him cleaning rivers.
Yeah.
He's like, that's what I do on my Sundays. I just go and clean rivers.
And he's very worried about like nuclear stuff and he's like you mentioned pacifist. He's very into environmentalism. And he's very into Japan being honest about their own history and not erasing their, portion of World War II.
Yeah, it's crazy. He says, Japan went crazy and joined this war. And I think he's very, you're right. He's not like, he doesn't let them off the hook for it, you know?
Right.
I mean, he went through some shit, essentially. And like he's got feelings and he's never really, I mean, even in this movie, he's talking about how, the Wind Rises had a lot of controversy over, there's a lot of smoking in this movie. Like, smoking and, just like kind of defiance towards Japan in general. And, Japan's like government, I guess, was kind of like cracking down on him a little bit and Studio Ghibli in general. And him and his producers are just like, man, like what age are we living in? Like, creativity is not, free anymore. And he kind of like gives tasks to the youth. Like, the youth don't care. They're not doing anything. And
it feels more genuine coming from him than it does for certain other figures in in pop culture.
Correct. You're right.
And maybe that's the different cultures. And
Yeah,
whatnot.
maybe that's a disconnect.
When Americans complain about the use, it's kind of like, hey,
shut up.
Yeah, old man.
Yeah.
RuPaul.
But I love you.
Yeah, but I love you, and you've had those experiences.
But girl.
But I do want to stress too, real quick, before we get fully into anything, we are only covering the films directed by Miyazaki. He, as part of Ghibli, has produced many a film, including films by his son, who's directed 2 movies, as well as films directed by his sometimes friend and
his nemesis.
Yeah, and sometimes rival, Isao Takahata.
That sounded pretty good.
Yeah, did that sound? Okay. I can pronounce the last name. And Isao Takahata's had like quite a career as well too. Yeah. But we are specifically only speaking to the films that Miyazaki's directed.
Correct. And so it's 11 or 12.
I think it's 12. There's one I couldn't find at all, which is the Conan Future Boy, which is based off a TV series that he directed all 26 episodes of. I found the TV series. I watched an episode of that. But
and I watched all of that and I loved it.
All 26 episodes. But just to give you some background information, Hayao Miyazaki is a Japanese film director, producer, screenwriter, animator, author, and manga artist. Because he has all the time in the world. His career spanned over 5 decades. He's attained international acclaim as a masterful storyteller and a maker of anime feature films. Along with Isao Takahata, they co-founded Studio Ghibli together, which is the film and animation studio, which has just garnered so much acclaim since the late to mid-90s.
Yeah.
But Miyazaki was born in the town of Akebono-cho in Bunko, Tokyo. I'm so sorry again. Once again.
Japan, we are very sorry.
He's the second of 4 sons born to Katsuji Miyazaki. His father was director of the Miyazaki Airplanes, which made rudders for A6M0 fighter planes during World War II. During the war, when Miyazaki was only 3 years old, the family evacuated and I can't pronounce these places. So they evacuated essentially to where the airplane factory was located. Miyazaki has said that his early life of his family was affluent and could live comfortably during the war because his father and uncle's profitable work in the war industry. But he has also noted that as a 4.5-year-old, experiencing the nighttime firebombing raids in 1945 left a lasting impression on him. During his May 22nd, 1998 lecture at the film festival in Nagoya, he retold the account of his family's hasty retreat from the burning town without providing a ride to other people in need of transportation.
Wow.
And he recalled how the fires had colored the night sky as he looked back towards the city after they had fled to a safer distance. Clearly the war, really colored his childhood. He graduated Amoya. I'm skipping ahead quite a bit. Amoya Junior High. He attended the Toyotama High School. During his 3rd year, Miyazaki's interest in animation was sparked by The Tale of the White Serpent. He, quote, fell in love with the movie's heroine, and it left a strong impression on him. And then he went on. He worked for Toei Animation in 1963. He worked as an in-between artist on theatrical feature film Watchdog Bow Wow. Yeah.
Excuse me?
Yeah. No, this is a real thing.
What'd you call me?
And then his friend Takahata got him really into the animation business, and in 1971 he left Toei for A-Pro, where he co-directed 14 episodes of the first Lupin the Third series with Isao Takahata. They also began pre-production on Pippi Longstocking series, which he drew extensive storyboards for. But then he led to Sweden to conduct research for the film, and the series was canceled. But yeah, eventually they split, and he started doing this television show, Futureboard Conan, and eventually ended up moving into films, including his first film, The Castle of, I'm going to say this wrong, because I heard it pronounced right.
Lupita?
No, Lupin the Third, but it's...
No. Oh, Castle of Cagliostro.
Yeah. I say Cagliostro. It's not.
Cagliostro.
Yeah.
Sure.
And from there, gained fame for that. Ended up doing Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, which is his second film. And then finally, Lupita and Castle in the Sky, which was the founding film of Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, that was his first, like, huge epic.
Absolutely. Now, Nausicaa, what's cool about that is, like, that was 100% him, because he had drawn the manga that it was based on as well.
Cool.
And it was something like 30 volumes, and he's like, cool, I gotta narrow that down for a 2-hour film. But yeah, so that's your backstory on him. He's currently in his...
he was 73 at the time of the documentary. And that was like a couple years ago.
And so he's lived a life. He's the oldest person we've covered so far.
Yeah, I mean, so he's lived a long life, and he's directed 12 pretty solid movies. You know, like, none of them on, like,
76, wow.
Yeah. Not yet 80. He's made 12 movies, and all of them, like, all of the critics' ratings, I didn't really see one that was, like, less than 80%, you know? But all of them are pretty solid. Also, these movies make a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, they, like, make so much money. They have, they had a huge 15-year distribution deal with Disney.
And for the most part, at the time that, you know, especially the 70s, 80s, when he was, like, starting to work up, animation was not really seen as, like, a big thing it was a there was a big business in Japan, but it wasn't a critical thing in Japan. And it has since become a much more critical thing. He even managed to win Best Film at the Japanese Academy Awards with Spirited Away. So
he also... Wait, what did you say? He won
Best Film at the Japanese Academy Awards with Spirited Away. He won Best Animated Film in the American Academy Awards.
I was like,
Japan has their own Academy Awards.
Good for them. That's cute.
That's cute.
That's cute. No, I mean, I would say I think it's way more impressive.
Well, I'm suddenly the Japanese people's favorite now.
I was thinking it's like way more impressive. Spirited Away is the only like Japanese, like it's literally the only non-Disney, non-Pixar, non-DreamWorks movie to ever win Best Animated Feature.
Absolutely.
And it's all hand-drawn.
Yes.
Which is like insane.
I think there's digital coloring in it, but I mean that's not.
Yeah, I mean compared to like the stuff that's like winning, and I started looking at other things, like all their other films get nominated all the time. I'm like, what the fuck won this year? And it was like some garbage, like I don't know, Cars or whatever, like you know. And I'm like, why? But whatever. I mean, good for Spirited Away that it was able to like break through that year to like it was because that movie's incredible.
Absolutely agree. I actually wrote a paper in college. It's getting dorky.
Just now?
Well, it was an argument that I'd had with another student that my teacher really wanted me to dig into, which was the idea that children would understand that there are non-Western ways of dealing with the good versus evil fight, and her example was Spirited Away versus something like Tarzan, which has an incredibly violent end to its main antagonist. And I basically had my niece at the time, who's now 18, but was 9 at the time, watch Spirited Away with me, and I like interviewed her, which is fun trying to interview a 9-year-old, but she was very articulate about understanding that like the villains in that movie weren't that bad, or that they in the end they were like nicer than
like because they didn't need to die, like,
right?
Absolutely,
that's what
evil
it was.
didn't need to be defeated.
Exactly,
you know?
And that's not to say that all of his films are like that. Castle in the Sky has an antagonist who just like there's no way he can live.
Yeah,
and so
sir, you need to go.
but like it's nice that he seems to give people more of a chance to to be more well-rounded and not just be like, I'm completely evil.
You know what just happened? Okay, so I remembered, I was looking up, Takahata's, his last thing that he came out with was,
Princess Kaguya.
Yeah, which is everyone saying is his masterpiece, right?
Yeah. Princess Kaguya is gorgeous.
I haven't watched this movie, but I checked to go see and it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Feature, and what won that year was Big Hero 6. And I was like, Big Hero 6 is a fine movie, but, like, it was definitely made by committee and, like, slapped together to, like, make you feel certain things at certain times. And I was just like, this movie, which is riffing a lot on Japanese art and storytelling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm like, and yet here we have, like, an actual, original, beautiful, gorgeous,
yeah.
You know.
And what's really cool about Princess Kaguya is, like, it's all done to look like old Japanese paintings. Like, it's very stylized.
Yeah.
So, like,
it's just weird. I mean, for the amount of love that Miyazaki has in the United States, I don't know why or how that doesn't translate to, more success.
Oh, absolutely.
But I mean, I post on Facebook, like, do I have any friends who are into this guy? And like, literally out of the woodwork, like, people from everywhere, were just like, yes, absolutely. And I was like, great.
The other thing I like to do on this show is I usually try and find interview clips of people to sort of have them, just so you hear from them as well. Miyazaki doesn't speak English. We're an English-speaking podcast, so you can't, I can't intersplice
Gavin, do
clips.
it. Do it, Gavin. Figure it out.
But perhaps you'll hear clips from the American dubs of his films. But that's also a controversial point. Some people don't particularly like the American rewrites or the American dubs. One of the great things about Miyazaki is after Nausicaa came out, there was I know I'm saying that name wrong, but
Nausicaa?
But after that came out, it was like super duper recut, and like something like 30 minutes of it was dropped, and like there were male characters that were put on the cover in place of her, and he has it written into his contract now that no one can make any cuts. And apparently when when Princess Mononoke was being released in the US, the Weinsteins had it, and Harvey Weinstein was going to make cuts to it, and Ghibli sent him a katana engraved with no cuts.
Amazing. What kind of level of petty? I fucking love it. Miyazaki was like, bitch, I wish you would.
Exactly.
I'm gonna send you a motherfucking sword.
That's what I love about, the great thing of that documentary is he seems like both the most chillest, sweetest old man, and he will fucking cut a bitch.
Yeah, but he's also the baddest motherfucker. And it's crazy because I watching his movies, I'm like, oh man, he must be the most romantic, character in the world, but sometimes he's like, well, what else is there to say? That's whatever. And he's like, no, that's just stupid. Why would I do that? And I'm like, I think he is a romantic, but I think he's just a great fucking storyteller.
Yeah.
And he sees something and he's, when he's telling his, artists, how he wants something to look, he's like, don't, if they're hunching, it makes them look, grotesque. And and it's all these little specific things.
Oh, I love it. And there's a moment towards the end where he's explaining how the main character in The Wind Rises should bow.
Yeah.
And about how, back then, when they bowed, they would stay sort of in that position and slowly rise back up, as opposed to nowadays where it's just a quick, it's become just sort of a reflexive thing. You bow and you're done.
Yeah. He was and that's disrespectful. And back then people had class and we need to reflect that in our movie. And then of course all the illustrators are making fun of him.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But,
and he's all this is a lip sync. What part of that don't you understand?
Literally that. Literally that. He just seems really cool. And, I hope, so The Wind Rises was the last thing he's made.
Yes. So I'll get to that towards the end of the episode, but there's been some news recently. So The Wind Rises was also his second retirement, I believe, because I believe he was supposed to retire shortly after Ponyo.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and then he decided to make The Wind Rises, and then he announced his retirement again. But we'll get to that later.
See.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
We'll see exactly. Shall we get to the list of films that we saw? Would you?
Okay, great. So I rewatched Spirited Away. I watched for the first time My Neighbor Totoro. I watched for the first time Princess Mononoke. Watched for the first time Howl's Moving Castle. Okay, honestly, I've only ever had watched Spirited Away. Is the truth. So I watched Howl's Moving Castle. I saw Castle in the Sky. I saw Kiki's. Oh, I rewatched Kiki's Delivery Service because I had seen that. I watched Ponyo. I watched Porco Rosso. I watched The Wind Rises. I think the only two that I did not watch were Nausicaa and Castle of Cagliostro.
So I saw everything that you mentioned except for I didn't get around to The Wind Rises, which bums me out. I'm still never seen Kiki's Delivery Service. Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Howl's Moving Castle, and Ponyo I've seen before, so I didn't revisit them, which means for the first time I saw My Neighbor Totoro, Castle in the Sky, Nausicaa, and the Castle of Cagliostro, and Porco Rosso. So, literally the only blank spots I have are The Wind Rises and Kiki's Delivery Service. But,
and I watched both of those, so
yeah.
I think we're solid.
We've solid, well-rounded. Yeah. I have access to those. I still plan on watching them. Maybe I'll give you a very short book report next episode.
Yes. But, so Gavin, any thoughts?
So 600 words. Yes. And oh my god! One time, one of my professors in college totally called me out for phoning something in because throughout an essay I'd completely spelled Orson Welles' name wrong several times, and she wrote she's like, "You clearly were not interested in writing this paper." I was like, "Yes,
you were clocked."
Yep, I was clocked. But yeah,
gotcha.
So I guess we're gonna get to our goods and our bads.
Yeah, show me the goods.
So, do you want me to go first? Because,
yeah.
Yes, because that means if I pick one...
No.
So I think undeniably his classic is Spirited Away. But for the purposes of this, and because I just watched it, I loved My Neighbor Totoro so much.
Aww.
So much.
That is a true Cumber #1. That is the original, the classic,
Yeah, exactly.
The Britney Spears of his collection of movies.
And then, that's amazing.
You cannot go wrong.
Exactly. And I had been meaning to watch it for years, and I know what a place it holds in a lot of people's heart.
Yeah.
And it's very cute. It's one of his more kid-friendly films, but it's got this real adult sort of heart. It's this film about these two girls who moved to the country with their father, and their mother is in a hospital because she has tuberculosis, and it's not going great. What I loved about the film as well is that it's he has sort of three or at least two ways that he does fantasy. He has sort of the casual magical realism, and then he has the full-out fantasies. And there's a lot of full-out fantasies in his canon, but Totoro sort of falls into the casual magical realism, where there's creatures that they can see and spirits, but not everybody sees them, and it's a much more common, mundane world that happens to be accented. When they first moved into this house, there's these dust spirits, and there's this really beautiful scene where the father's like, if something scares you, laugh to know it doesn't bother you. And they start laughing, and the spirits just leave their home. They're just like, I guess we gotta go now. Fine. And I love that because it's not integral to the plot, but it's integral to the emotional art.
And it tells you something about this world that we're living in, and the stories that they're telling, because more spirits are coming in the form of Totoro, and his little friends are so cute. His little
friends are the best.
I was like, who are these little Totoros?
The cat bus, the fucking cat bus.
Amazing.
How amazing is cat bus?
When will your fave animate a cat bus who's little insides open up for you to get inside of him? And it's not weird.
I was gonna say, that's the thing. Something there's a bus that's an anthropomorphic cat that shows up later in the film, and it's sides grow to fit the opening of things so Totoro can get in, who's a giant forest spirit. He's literally, if it was for real life, he'd be 10 foot tall.
Yeah.
And it's not creepy or gross or weird, and you just sort of go with it. My friend Colin has a niece who, at 2 years old, she knitted her a cat bus for Christmas because she loved the cat bus so much.
Is she taking orders?
Yeah.
Or...
I'll get you in contact.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's this very sweet film. It's funny because when it came out, it was basically sort of people didn't have the faith that it would do well on its own, so much so that they actually double featured it with Grave of the Fireflies, which is a Takahata film. And I have to say, I've seen Grave of the Fireflies. It's one of the saddest anime movies. Yeah, it is a war film, and it's devastating, and I just cannot imagine watching those two movies together.
One of these things.
Well, you would definitely need Totoro afterwards, or else you would stab yourself in the heart in the theater. You would Elliot Smith your way out of the theater, and I can't imagine watching those two together, but that's what sold it, and people fell in love with that as a double feature and everything too. And it's so funny because Grave of the Fireflies is much more adult in terms of themes and realism and everything. And Totoro's this whimsical film about these two little girls. And what made it even better too is he mentioned that it's very semi-autobiographical in terms of him and his younger brother. And he said he wouldn't have been able to make the film if the two main characters were boys, because they went through the same thing with their mother after she got sick and began to pass away. And it's a hard thing, I think, when you're a kid to putting together mortality. But that's the other thing that Miyazaki does is he's doesn't sugarcoat these themes of like, sometimes people die, and when they die, they don't come back. And like, that happens. And admittedly, this doesn't happen in the movie, spoiler alert, but there's a real sense for a moment there that like, things could go really, really bad.
Yeah. This movie doesn't have like a lot of high stakes, but it definitely gets your heart racing a little bit when, the younger, girls are young. Right. One of them is like 4 or something. The older daughter maybe is 10.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't even know. Yeah.
And, the older daughter is, trying to be very strong, whatever, but there's a really, like, heartbreaking scene when she finally breaks down, is this, like, I cannot take care of my little sister, and I really want my mom back.
May, the doctor said that Mom's not doing well, so she doesn't get to come home this weekend.
No fair!
It can't be helped, May. What if she came home early and it made her even worse?
It's not fair!
May, we just have to wait a little longer.
No!
You want her to die, May? Is that what you want?
No!
You're such a baby. Just grow up.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And the little girl runs away, and there's a kind of like a little bit of mystery thing, like what happened to this little girl. And it's, so it does get close to being, very sad.
Right.
But it's such a nice, like, the parents in that movie are so great. Like, the dad seems like such a nice guy.
He really does.
I was just like, man.
I had to, for the most part, I tried to find as many, in their original language with subtitles as I could. I couldn't find My Neighbor Totoro in its original language, but I was kind of happy I didn't. The father was played by Tim Daly, and he does such a good job.
And the girl,
and that's the voice of Superman. If you're a kid my age, which is like in his early 30s now, but like I grew up on Superman the animated series, and Tim Daly was Superman.
Hello.
So like,
it literally is that. And then the girls are Elle and Dakota Fanning.
Yeah, and they're great.
So good.
It's funny too, that movie had a very weird history going, where like when it was first brought to America, it was actually brought to America through Troma. Troma Films, if you don't know what Troma Films are, they're like the best in low class, low budget cinema. Toxic Avenger, Tromeo and Juliet, like Poultrygeist. But they released it through they have another like 85th Street Films or something like that. That's a slightly more respectable way to get that out. And that's originally how it came out. And then when Disney got involved, they redubbed it. So there are 2 dubs out there, and I actually prefer the Disney dub.
Yeah.
Because of Elle Fanning and Dakota Fanning's performances, which it's not easy. Like, it's not easy to rewrite to match the words. Japanese is a very different language, obviously. To rewrite the mouths to the words and make it make sense and make it all, function as a cohesive whole. The other thing I like about it is, it doesn't have a lot of, I think there's 3 big themes that Miyazaki likes to work on. I think they're environmentalism, anti-war, and compassion.
Yeah. And
I know that sounds weird because like all movies have some sort of, but like he's really good at creating very compassionate characters. And the scene I would go to in Totoro is when they're standing in the rain. Yeah. And the older sister hasn't met Totoro yet. And he's a giant monster who growls. And they're standing in the rain and he's getting wet. He has a leaf over his head. And the first thing she does, instead of being like scared or run away, is she's like, oh, here's this other umbrella. Yeah. And it's beautiful. It's so smart and so well done. And it's a nice... But the movie doesn't have really those I guess it does because they are forest spirits and everything. But like the anti-war, the environmentalist thing takes sort of a back seat in that one.
Totoro is very important just because it's their most popular, famous movie.
Yeah. They even talk about it in Kingdom of Madness and Dreams about how
the merchandise,
and also how merchandise has changed over time because now they're no longer aiming that merchandise at kids. Yeah. It's actually for adults. Yeah. It's in collectibles.
And that stuff is still selling, is still their best selling stuff. And like, when you think of Ghibli, you think of that iconic scene of them standing in the rain and like him shaking for, water to come down on them. And it's something so simple like that to create these iconic, simple characters that like, I mean, Totoro's just like a kind of fat monster character, and everyone loves him, and it's so cute. And also, like I said, the song at the very end is so cute.
And what's funny about the song, speaking of the two different dubs, they didn't change any of they had somebody else sing it, but for the Disney redub, they didn't change any of the translation, which I think is really cool, because they don't have to match the mouth up to anything. So they're just like, okay, accurate translation. Yeah. Let's just get it out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that song is really adorable.
Yeah. Totoro is definitely a high point for sure.
But I would like to hear your high.
My pick is something you haven't watched. It's Kiki's Delivery Service. Kiki, was the first movie I saw of his, and I remember being a little youth, like staying up past my bedtime for whatever reason, and I clicked on Disney Channel, and this movie was playing, and I was just completely struck, like, what is this? Like, she's a little witch, and
she certainly is.
But she doesn't look like other witches. You know, you can tell she's got a broom and she's got a black dress, but she's that little red bow, you know, and I was just completely taken by this movie, and so I rewatched it just to kind of like get fresh eyes on it, and I loved it even more. I didn't even realize what this movie was about when I was a kid. It was like, what a pleasant, you know, it's a gentle movie. It's another of his like kid movies. You know, there's not high stakes or drama here. Essentially this movie is about Kiki, who she's turning 13, and she is a witch. Her mom is a witch, and she has to leave for a year to live on her own to become a full-fledged witch and have her training. And so it's the day of her birthday is actual full moon, and so she wants to take off, and her mom gives her a broom, and she just flies away, and she has a cat named Gigi. He's a boy. And he's kind of like, you know, her spirit animal character, like guidance and stuff, and she ends up at this, you know, this kind of hustle bustle city, and starts working at a bakery, and the woman who runs the bakery, she's pregnant and she needs some help delivering stuff. And this movie turns into like these little vignettes. It's based on a manga, I'm sure, actually. Or it's a novel. I think it's a novel. It's based on something else. That's super accurate. But like, and
that's, people come here for just the facts.
Yes, just the facts based on something else. And so she starts, delivering, and she's meeting people, you know, and each one is like an adventure. One, she has to deliver like a stuffed cat that looks exactly like Gigi. And the cat, you know, she drops her package. So, Gigi takes like, it's just like antics that are going on. There's a boy that, in the dub is voiced by one of the Lawrence brothers.
Yes, Matthew Lawrence. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I, like I said, I haven't watched it. I did watch some clips, and I do want to say, I want to stick up for the dub for that, because not only is Kiki our girl, Kirsten Dunst.
Hello.
Yeah. Call back to our first episode. But also, Gigi is voiced by the late, great Phil Hartman.
Yeah, that was his last thing he did.
Exactly. And some of the clips I watched, I gotta admit, like, his timing, and I know, like, the animation has to be credited for the timing as well, but just the way, like, there's a scene where she mentions she's been, like, photographed, and, like, it's totally inappropriate for a kid's movie. He's, like, nude. And it's just, like, and I love his delivery.
How are you? Hungry?
No, I'm tired.
Yeah, me too. I'm very tired. We're both gonna sleep well tonight. By the way, that painter who found the stuffed cat told me she wants to do a drawing with me in it.
Naked?
Gigi!
Yeah, this movie is so great. What I think this movie is really about is about a girl who's growing up and having to figure things out for herself. I mean, if you can imagine being 13, and going off and just like figuring out where to live, getting a job, and like figuring out who you are. There's the boy, I forgot his name, Tonda, something, whatever. He like likes her, and she's like freaking out about that. There's popular girls that are kind of like cooler than her, even though she's a fucking witch. And like the whole thing is like, oh, there's only one witch per each town. So she literally is like, is there a witch here? No? Cool. Dibs.
So it's just like real life.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Manhattan only has 3 wishes.
True.
Which is crazy because there's 5 boroughs.
But, and it's about, she meets women along the way, these older women who help her, and the really like drama of this story is like her self-doubt, and she doesn't think she's good enough, and so she loses her flight for a while. She she can't talk to Gigi anymore, and it's all, but she learns through the woman who's running the bakery, a grandmother who like she spends time with. She bakes her cakes, and then Kiki delivers them, and also this random artist character whose voice in the English dub is Janine Garofalo. And it's just like, she's helping her, like, she says magic is like art, it comes from inside you and you make it. And there's like this great scenes of like this woman like drawing a portrait of Kiki and says, the magic will come back, just don't worry about it. And she's able to kind of like really find herself and who she is. And it's like a sweet little story. And literally I could watch this forever. Like I could watch more adventures, more delivery service things of her doing stuff. I mean, the movie kind of ends just like she kind of regains her magic. She saves this boy from like a huge dirigible that's going to like crash into the ground. And then there's like, they do that montage at the end. They do it at the end of Totoro also. There's a montage of like things that are, what is happening with, the girls and her dad and the mom come home. And Kiki, you kind of see her doing more delivery stuff. And so like, this is a snapshot of this life of this little witch. And I guess it's in like Britain somewhere. So again, like
like that movie is famous for, in terms of its animation, a lot of its vertical pans, which like have height in animation is not as easy to do, like a pan down, as it is like a pan across. I suppose that's a tilt down. Fine, someone's gonna call me on that. I know. A tilt down. That requires a lot of hand-drawn animation, a lot of cells in between. And it just, it's moving from up to down or down to up versus from side to side, which is sort of an easier, more fluid motion.
Yeah.
And so it's not an easy thing to accomplish.
And I think they do that a lot because she's taking off on her broom, going straight up into the air, then falling down. And there's a lot of, flight things happening, which is a huge theme.
Oh my God. Flight. That was the other theme that I didn't mention in Miyazaki's films. He's all about flight.
He's obsessed. Yeah. Like, being a kid with his dad making these airplanes, really, like in this movie, not only do we have Kiki flying on her broom, her friend, he like has like a bicycle with like a big turbine on it, and he like is obsessed with making model planes. There's a huge dirigible that's like flying around, and it is ever present with this flying, and the magic of flying, that is like the ultimate thing. Like this movie, a friend told me, she was like, I don't really like Kiki. She's a witch. Why isn't there more magic going on? And I was like, you can shut the hell up, okay? Like, you're American garbage.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, the nice thing about hearing you talk about it too is it makes me realize sort of that separation between Western ideals and Eastern ideals, as well as that her hero's journey would have to be more about like, in an American film, about questing to get her magic back.
Yeah.
And having a character that just tells her, like...
She has to go find a thing, and then...
Exactly. And to have a character tell her that she needs to look inward instead of outward is a very more Eastern ideal than it is a Western ideal.
Literally all women in this movie, except for her one friend who, like, has a crush on her. The dad is around also, but, like, she is finding herself through these role models of the woman who's taking a chance on her and hiring her, this grandmother who needs help, like, cooking these cakes, and this artist who kind of just sees, like, someone that she can really help out, and and equates what she's doing, with her magic to what she's doing as an artist. And I thought that was great. I was like, I don't want Kiki, like, Aloha Mora-ing, like, Harry Pottering the shit out of everything. Like, it was great.
Has your friend ever seen Sarah Michelle Gellar's Simply Irresistible? We know how quick that can go badly.
Come on. The iconic classic.
Simply Irresistible, yes.
So I love this movie. It's so sweet, and it's a great movie for, young girls, I think, to kind of, it's one of his simpler, I think, movies, but like, there's nothing to hide behind in this movie. There's no, like, flash, but, he has a lot of flash, and he does it really well. But yeah, I would highly suggest Kiki's.
It's interesting that we both went for the smaller movies. I want to give just a quick shout out to some of the other ones that are really great. I mentioned Spirited Away before. Spirited Away is like his classic children's movie.
Spirited Away, I could listen to that soundtrack until I die. because that movie,
Also, No Face is like one of my favorite characters ever created.
it's, I mean, and again, the characters there, like the evil, like Yubaba,
Yeah.
and nothing happens to her.
No.
She gets her comeuppance by being like, I solved the riddle,
Yeah.
and you're gonna continue working at your, like, spirit house, whatever.
Yeah, and there's like a real sense of she's like, well, maybe I have been a jerk.
Yeah.
Like-
Literally. She's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, even No Face, who's kind of, like, horrifying in the middle there,
right.
like, the sister, I forgot her name, she's like, you just stay with me and I'll take care of you. And
Yeah.
No Face is like, chill.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, like, the one thing that sticks out for that movie for me is just, like, the music never stops.
No.
Never. It's always in the background, like, and it's building and, like, coming back, and it's insane. I love it.
And that movie also has some of the best, like, cute characters and whatnot. The dust spirits return for that movie.
Yes.
And, yeah, there's a
little
lot of
rat
great.
and
Yeah, the little
bird.
rat's my favorite. Oh my god. But you know, there's that Princess Mononoke, which I think is his most adult, most pro environment film.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into in that movie. And I was like, oh, she's sucking the blood out of that thing.
Yeah. Yep.
I was like, oh, he shot an arrow and his head came all the way off? Cool.
Yeah, that one's definitely the least kid friendly.
Yeah. I was shocked.
And I don't know if you want to add any other. I really feel bad about The Wind Rises, especially. I had this whole thing planned about, because I remember when it came out, there was this whole, like, in Japan, it was seen as this very, like, controversial, like, he's against the fact that Japan's sort of erasing part of their history and being more militaristic, and he's saying we shouldn't go back towards that. And then in America, it was seen as glorifying.
Yeah, glorifying this guy who created warplanes. I thought the movie was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think the whole point was, we cannot erase what's going on here. Like,
yeah.
And also I just thought like, if your dream is to make beautiful planes, like, he based this off of an actual man.
Yeah.
And this is his first, like, biographical, animated story. But also his own experience and his father's experiences really influenced this movie. First of all, it's gorgeous. Like, the man is sitting at his desk drawing out his planes, and when he's inspired, like, just wind just, like, rushes through him, and, like, the animation is just gorgeous.
I wish I'd gotten a chance to watch before.
And then the whole idea of, like, it's just like the monetizing of dreams. Like, my dream is to make all these beautiful planes, and at the end of it, it's like, he finally makes these gorgeous, like, Zero fighters. And the end of the movie is like, he says, none of them came back. Because those are the Japanese planes that went to war, and the Japanese lost.
Yeah.
And so, like, he knew, like, having to reconcile, like, I want to make beautiful things, but the government is co-opting this to make destruction and death, and it's awful, and it sucks. And that movie, I mean, that was the last movie I saw of his, and, I thought it was really beautiful and gorgeous, and you could tell how, like, invested you could just feel Miyazaki's, like, hands all over it.
And I know you didn't get a chance to see Nausicaa. Nausicaa was a real labor of love for him, because, like I said, he wrote the manga as well, and had to condense like 30 books into 2 hours. I think that movie's really beautiful and really focused, and it is a really cool, neat story. It's both more adult than some of those others, but also more childish. I could see showing a kid they might not be interested the whole time because it's a little long. It's 2 full hours, which is a lot for a kid to sit through. But I would highly recommend that. And that's like his second film. Yeah. That's pretty high praise.
Yeah, it's insane. He's lots of great stuff, but
I guess we also have to discuss the bad stuff.
Yes, correct.
And so I'm going to let you go first on this.
At first I was thinking, I did have some issues with Princess Mononoke. I was talking to a friend about it because I had to be really critical, like, because all these movies are pretty fucking good.
I was going to say that, like, this was a harder thing to do because with everyone we've done so far, there just have been bad movies.
There have been movies where they needed to make a check.
Yeah.
Miyazaki has such control. I mean, for 70 years of life, and what, maybe like 50 working, or maybe 60 working?
Yeah, 5 decades. Yeah. That's crazy.
To make 12 films.
Yeah.
That's not like a huge, like, amount of things that he's doing, but he has such control, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna make a shitty movie. So I thought in Princess Mononoke, I was like, no one really changes or maybe learns anything at the end. But I love that movie. So, no. But thank God for this podcast that, I saw Porco Rosso.
I just saw it today.
I was like, what is this movie though?
Yeah.
And at the beginning, like going into it, like I read the synopsis and it's like, oh, this guy's a pig and he's a warplane fighter. So we have lots of flying in here again. This movie takes place completely in Italy.
Yes.
And I was like, well, this is interesting. I don't know the dub version I found. I don't know if it was like a bad version or like, is the dub just bad? Because I was like, beyond like the technical stuff of like, their voices were happening and nothing was happening with their mouth. I thought the dialogue was also clunky.
You might have gotten
I might have gotten a bad one.
Was it Michael Keaton? Because Michael Keaton's the dub in the Disney.
I am not sure.
Okay.
So beyond that,
because he's pretty great actually as Porco. I gotta say.
I thought, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get ready for jokes. Like, oh, there's a funny thing about when pigs fly, about something going on. I didn't realize how hard they were gonna keep hitting it.
Yeah.
Like, they hit it over and over again with not that specific joke, but like, variations on that joke.
You're in Italy? You idiot! The Italians have a
warrant out for your arrest, remember? I don't care how great your mechanic is over there. You get back home, you hear me?
I don't want to yell at you, Marco.
But if you keep acting so pig-headed, you're gonna end up dead. I can't bear to go to another pilot's funeral.
And so essentially Porco Rosso's story is about, a man, but he's a pig. And
I will say too, like, I just want to, cause I agree with you. It's definitely not one of my favorites. I enjoyed, like, the love they put it, but, like, this is what I mean by the casual magical realism. It's literally not until half an hour into the movie's only an hour and a half, and it's not until half an hour into the film when somebody finally mentions that he's cursed.
Yeah. They're like, so, how did you become a pig, though?
Yeah, exactly. Like literally his girlfriend's just like, oh, we need to figure out that curse. And it's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Because everybody's just treated him as a normal person except for the fact that he's a pig.
Yeah, well, the entire movie, like, they treat him like, oh, he's so mysterious, and he's a great jet fighter, and blah, 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 this and that. I guess this movie's also taking place around World War I-ish time. Yeah,
it's just pre-World War II because there's lots of talk about fascism creeping into Italy.
Yeah, correct.
There is one really good, a scene that I really liked, which is he's in a movie theater and a fascist Italian is like trying to recruit him and he's basically just like, I'd rather be a pig than be a fascist. Like,
and and so that's the joke. That joke happens all the time where he's like, oh, pig that, a pig. I thought it was also a little bit strange, and maybe I just had a bad dub, but they're like, oh, the American. And I was like, everyone so far has had American accents, and so I couldn't tell if they were talking about Porco being the American.
No.
But they were not. They were talking about, like, eventually it became clear who this American character was, and
I like that there's a quick, like, knock at Ronald Reagan towards at the end of the movie.
He's like,
they're like, he's a Hollywood actor. He hasn't become president yet.
Yeah,
and it's like, yes!
I don't know, that movie, he essentially,
it's super low stakes, that movie, which is crazy because the villains are fascists.
Literally, and it's like, he's like an anti-hero, kind of. He's like, I don't want to go fly my plane. There's also, weirdly, a lot of, like, misogynism.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a very strange.
Did I say misogynism?
Yeah, you did.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you want to take that again so I can read it, or do you want?
There's a lot of like misogyny. Nailed it.
Woo! No one will ever hear that other thing, even though I was talking over to you, so I'll have to keep it in.
Great.
But
it's weird because I thought they were framing. He's a girl. She can't help me like make my plane, and the woman just is kind of like, oh, you're so silly. Like, of course I can.
Who's gonna design my plane?
Theo will do it.
Theo, that cute little girl.
Don't be such a pig. She's a talented engineer, even better than my son's.
And so, like, her reaction to all these, like, yeah, she's a girl, is just kind of like, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I wanted her to be like, listen, bitch. Like,
yeah. Well, that's the crazy thing. Like, he's normally very much a feminist, and, like, that movie, it comes out of nowhere. Like, even in the end, there's this bet about, which also feels, like, weird and, like, unimportant.
Yeah.
And it's a bet between him and the American, which is like, they're going to have a dogfight in their planes. If the American wins, he gets to marry this young female mechanic. And if Porco wins, he gets money. Yeah. And first of all, that's weird because that instantly reduces her to property.
And but also it's weird because she's like, okay.
Yes. And then at the end, when obviously Porco's going to win, the American's just like, well, next time I'll just ask you to marry me instead. And she's like, hi, but but I already know what my answer will be.
Yeah.
And it's just like, no, she should be like, gross, get away from me, you weirdo.
Yeah, it's so weird that they like wrote her in such a weird way. I was like, this is how we're doing this?
Right.
Like, at the end, he wins, and like, of course, he like saves her and doesn't have to like marry her after and whatever. And I was like, well, what? And this curse? And like, they also kind of casually be like, at the very end, the American casually is like, oh, your face, let me look at it.
Yeah, and they don't tell you. I do kind of like that, though.
They allude to it, but I was like, but why?
Because she kissed him. Well, earlier in the movie, she mentions, like, the Frog Prince, and she's like, it's like the Frog Prince, where, like, she kisses the frog, and he's like, that's a little kid's tale. And so she kisses him at the end as, like, she's pulling away. And it's true. Fixes the curse. It's stupid. Regardless, it's not, I'm not defending it, Louie.
I thought this movie was just like, I wanted it to be funnier. Like, he's kind of like a Wolverine light. Yeah. Like, I don't know, I'm pretty cool, and women or whatever.
Well, it is also weird that it's like, oh, he's a womanizer, and it's like, did all that happen prior to the curse? Or, like...
I mean, and the curse came on because he thinks is because he, like, got away in a huge fight in the war, and he feels like super guilty that his like entire squad died.
I did think that scene where like the vision of heaven, where it's just a line of planes of people that died in the war, and not necessarily heaven, because also there's you know the opposition there as well. I thought that was really pretty, but that like one really pretty scene does not a full movie make. I suppose
it was crazy. I mean, all these other things were the casual like magic stuff happening. It makes sense and you can accept it. And this, I was like, yeah, he's cursed. But like, there's nothing else in this movie that's magical. Literally.
And I would feel like that this should happen more often to Miyazaki, because it's explained in the, in the documentary that he...
Oh yeah, he says...
he creates the movie as he goes along, like, by making storyboards. So even he doesn't know the ending, like, as it's happening. And, like, you would think that would happen more often with these films. But it's mostly just this one.
Yeah, and he says, even in the documentary, he's like, Porco Rosso is a foolish film.
Yeah, which is crazy because there's been very few times in which he's thought of doing sequels, and Porco Rosso was one of the ones he thought of doing a sequel to, which I don't understand.
I was like, no.
There is a sequel to My Neighbor Totoro, by the way, but it only plays in the Ghibli Museum in Tokyo.
Wow.
It's a 14-minute short, and I wish I could find it, but I can't.
Gavin, let's go.
I know. Kitten bus. There's a kitten bus in it.
Oh my god.
Yes, sorry.
We're gonna have a very special episode live from Japan.
Just be a lot of us very confused saying, arigato.
Squarespace, we need you now more than ever. Send us to Japan.
So I guess it's my turn.
You go ahead. What's your least favorite Miyazaki film?
I'm gonna try and do this real quick, just so because I once again I don't feel comfortable shitting on him because he's so good. But Castle of Cagliostro is the only time I've ever been bored by a Miyazaki film. It is a film version of Lupin the Third, who's a gentleman thief character, who's a character I actually like. I've seen some of the Lupin the Third cartoon episodes, and I enjoy it. This movie doesn't really work. It takes Lupin. It's like taking taking James Bond and dropping him into an 80s fantasy film. It doesn't really
Sign
work.
me up.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's like a gentleman thief, and he finds this girl in a car chase, and it turns out she's being held captive by this villain who needs her, like, ring because their families were related, and, like, this castle is supposed to hold this treasure, and it just, none of it coalesces for me.
How can there be a happy ending to this romantic tale? The fair damsel believes in the power of the wicked sorcerer, yet she has no faith in the powers of the thief. Oh, if only she'd believe in him. Then he'd be able to fly through the air.
They introduce a lot of the characters from the show, characters he's met before, but because, like, I don't have a background in the show, that felt very foreign to me. Not foreign in the way that, like, it's Japanese and I'm American, but foreign in the way that just, like,
I know what the fuck's going on.
Exactly. And like, it's his first film. I just don't think the animation was up to par. The villain, like, half the time doesn't look like he has a human face. And
Great.
like,
Lovely.
and yeah, I just think that movie's a mess. And I was glad that the next movie, Nausicaa, was able to really sort of congeal that. And it's funny too, because you can see the evolution of his style too. And it's really not until Castle in the Sky, which was his third in the founding of Ghibli, like that it starts to really look like a Miyazaki film.
Yeah.
And Castle Cagliostro looks like a Lupin the Third movie, and Nausicaa looks much more like it seems weird saying traditional anime, because I feel like when someone tells you they don't like anime, that's like saying I don't like music. There's too many different types.
What do you mean, though?
Yeah, exactly. But that movie Nausicaa feels much more traditional looking, and then really he sort of comes into his own style.
Castle Sky is pretty fucking good also.
Oh yeah, Castle in the Sky was great.
I was like, yes to this pirate grandma.
Yeah. Who
has great hair and is crazy.
It's funny, I watched Castle in the Sky with an American dub, but with the Japanese subtitles on, the Japanese English subtitles on.
Oh, okay.
And it's crazy to see how different, because dubs have to match the mouths, and
they changed the...
Yeah.
I mean, and I read that they kind of changed some of, in that movie specifically, like, the relationships between people.
Yeah,
They aged up the characters.
Yeah, to make the love story sort of work a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I have a friend who messaged me on Facebook, and he was like, I hate the Disney dubs. I cannot watch them. Yeah. They're awful. And so,
I don't blame anybody for not, but
if you want to, like, the pure Miyazaki experience, like, sure, great.
I've seen both Spirited Away. Spirited Away is probably the one I've seen the most. I've seen it both in its original and with the dub, because I was showing my niece, and like, a 9-year-old's not going to sit there and read the entire time.
Yeah.
But,
I'm not gonna even make fun of your niece.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's lovely.
Hey, Taya, want to sit down and read this novel with me? Like,
no, bye.
Yeah, bye. Is Hannah Montana on? That's
Thanks.
back when it was. But yeah, so, Castle Cagliostro, like, I'm not saying don't give it a chance if it's up your alley. Like I said, I'm a huge James Bond fan, so I love that sort of like spycraft sort of, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah. And the familiar with, like, also, Porco Rosso has like an 88% rating on fresh Rotten Tomatoes, whatever.
Yeah, these are very soft negatives.
Yeah, and I was, but honestly, I couldn't believe, because I really don't like Porco Rosso. Like, I don't think, I mean, maybe, I think maybe it was my poor dub, which is bad on me, whatever, but I was like, I could not, like, other movies I'll watch again.
I think, Porco Rosso is really beautiful looking, and I think there's some really cute stuff in it, but I don't feel the need to ever see it again.
I will also say, quickly, you mentioned, Ponyo, that I don't really like Ponyo, but
I don't really like it either.
But I think it is maybe the most beautiful of the movies he's made. I was like, this visual is insane.
And I will say, like, even in the films, like, even in the very few that I don't like, he's so charming, and he finds a way to make them so charming and so likable. Ponyo's such a weird, like, the design of Ponyo herself, is insane and like uncomfortable at points, and yet, I don't know, there's something very charming about that. Also, like, he's so smart. He, like, for Ponyo, he took this story by Hans Christian Andersen, and he mixed it in with Wagner's Die Valkyrie, which is an opera, and like, it's weird to like,
and it works.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, Lupin's based on something, and it doesn't always work when he takes it, but Howl's Moving Castle's an adaptation.
Mm-hmm,
and like, I think he's really smart in the way that he like picks his adaptations and works them into his own style. Howl's Moving Castle, I haven't seen it in years. I will say, in terms of morality, because it's very anti-war, and I'm totally with him.
Yeah.
But it is the simplest in terms of morality. Like, it's basically just like, war is awful. And Howl himself gets to like a point of nihilism in his anti-warness.
Yeah. And that's a good move. That's one of the, I thought that was really nice to look at.
Yeah.
And there's lots of interesting characters. But as far as the story was going, I was like, what? Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, and I think it's maybe one of, again, like, seeing an English setting with a Japanese lens, it's kind of like if you're not used to watching, anime or, movies like that, it definitely is like a shock to the system, like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, I, for the most part, his movies were great. Like I said, though, these are not bingeable movies. Like,
no.
It's weird, because I remember in college, they were like, we're having, Miyazaki night, we're gonna watch 3 movies. I didn't, and I was like, but how? After I saw Mononoke, I was like, I need to, like, sleep. I need to, like, get away from this.
Yeah.
The movies are layered, and, like, they're gonna make you feel things, and it's not, just like I could burn through watching like Lion King and, you know, Moana and whatever, like in a day, whatever. Not Miyazaki. She is not that bitch.
Yeah, no, not at all. So just to recap real quick, our highs were, for me, My Neighbor Totoro.
Mine is Kiki's Delivery Service.
And our lows were...
Porco Rosso for me.
And for me, it was Castle of Cagliostro. Now, at the end of the episode, what we like to do is tell you where you can see their stuff. We mentioned earlier, Miyazaki is retired. Or is he?
Dun, dun, dun.
So he's in his 70s, but he's decided to come out of retirement to work on his new movie. And the fun thing is if you're an animator, you might have a chance to work on it. Yeah. There's a job listing at Studio Ghibli for the feature. They're going back into full feature productions, which was something people worried about when he retired, that it wasn't, that they were going to stop doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Did they think they were just going to start doing like, show stuff?
Just shows and shorts and more just producing other things. The film listing says, to do this film, please lend us the power of youth. The production period is 3 years. We're looking for those to come together to create work. It's for background animation and background art, which is really awesome. If you're interested, successful candidates will begin work on October 1st, 2017, which is when the movie will go into full-time production. As mentioned before, contracts for 3 years, and the salary is for 200,000 yen, which is only $1,794 in US.
What?
Yeah, per month.
Okay.
With twice annual bonuses. Travel to and from work will be reimbursed, though there's a limit how much travel allowance is allotted. So if you're coming from America, you should maybe get a house there.
Yes.
Work begins at 10 a.m. and ends at 7 p.m. with an hour break. There's overtime, of course, there is. Yeah. But yeah, that's crazy that you can apply to this. I'm very excited Miyazaki's decided to come out of retirement, but they are definitely saying, because he's in his 70s, that this is probably his very last film.
Yeah. Takahata made his last movie when he was 80.
Yes.
Right? And that movie, Kayuga.
Yeah, Princess Kaguya.
Was, you know, pushed back and back farther and further because he did not want to finish that movie.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine it must be fucking hard being 80 years old and like hand drawing all these storyboards and like literally looking over everything. And especially for The Wind Rises, I imagine it was so personal to him and like, you know, really just...
Well, I mean, a lot of them put money on the fact that he wasn't going to retire because he changed the ending last minute. And I don't want to say what the ending is, but like, it's all throughout Kingdom of Madness and Dreams that like, he has a very specific ending in mind, and it was very clear that that was going to be on his way out. I don't know if he made it all the way through the documentary to the point where they actually watch it, but by the end of it, he's in tears, and he admits that he has to speak to to the crew that made it. They do a crew only screening, and gets the end, and he stands up to speak, and he's like, I'm embarrassed because this is the first time my work has made me cry.
Wow.
And it's really beautiful. The other thing I did want to mention too, if there's any of these movies that you wanted to see, there's actually, in the US, they're doing a like sort of, I think it's 6 months, Miyazaki Film Festival, called Ghibli Fest.
Casual.
Yeah, it's being hosted by G Kids and Fathom Events. If you don't know what Fathom Events are, they do a lot of the like restorations and screenings around the nation. There's usually a theater in everyone's town that does them.
The AMC that they do it's like the opera, like the Met Opera stuff.
Yes.
And
different movie by Miyazaki will be showcased in the cinema. For 2 days, one a month beginning this June. So, Princess Mononoke, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Castle in the Sky, Nausicaa in the Valley of the Wind, and Spirited Away in October, and Howl's Moving Castle in November. So yeah, it's close to 6 months, and, I would highly recommend going to go see them on the big screen.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, most of these will be digital projections. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's worth seeing these animated
Spirited
films.
Away is a great Halloween movie.
Oh, absolutely. Well, even this article I found is like, just in time for Halloween, Spirited Away.
Perfect.
And like, I might, maybe, I'll go see Totoro in June.
You need to go see Kiki.
I do need to go see Kiki.
Hello?
In July. It's a good July movie. July 23rd and July 24th is when that'll be in theaters. But I'm excited that something that we're talking about, like, you can actually go, like, you can sort of see these repertory screenings and do that. So we picked a really good time to do this because it's May.
Hello.
Yeah, it's literally a month away. So, yeah.
Perfect. Do we have some business to take care of?
Oh, we do have some business to take care of.
This week, I put up the poll late, and then I, fucked it up, so we didn't get a lot of votes, but...
No. And also, just, you guys, you seem to like little white girls more than you like powerful black women. I'm just putting it out there. Maybe.
We're just gonna, let that simmer in the air, guys.
Yeah.
Okay? Think about what you've done.
Maybe give Whoopi Goldberg more credit and give her more votes.
So we asked what was your favorite Whoopi Goldberg movie, and with 8% got Color Purple, 17%, which was our pick, Boys on the Side, 25% for Ghost, and 50% for Sister Act, which we should have known.
Yeah, we
not surprised.
I did get one comment from my friend Dennis who said I voted for Sister Act, but I mean Sister Act 2. And I was like, we talked about that.
I made the poll and I was like, I don't want to put, I want to put Sister Act 2, but I'm not going to put Sister Act 2. I don't want to be that dick. But correct, Dennis.
I also want to give a shout out, one of our listeners I met in real life.
What?
Yeah, Clutter and Kindle on Twitter. Her name is Melissa. She's a really, really cool person. She's actually been listening to me blather on through 3 of the 5 podcasts I've had.
Damn, true fan.
Yeah, and so thank you so much for listening, and it was awesome to get a chance to meet you. And yeah.
What did she say?
Cool. She was just awesome. She was just cool in real life. But we both went to, we're very cultured people, and we went to an Offenbach operetta, which will probably never be
What'd you call me?
Yeah, exactly.
Offenbach, how dare.
Yeah, and no, she was just real chill and real cool. And
did she tell you what her favorite Whoopi Goldberg movie was?
No, she didn't.
She's like, it's a secret ballot.
I take everything back.
Yeah. How dare you?
But yeah, thank you so much everybody for listening. I'll do a quick rundown of where you can find us. If you need to find us on Twitter.
Yep.
Not if you need to, if you want to, because you want to talk to us.
If you want more cool stuff from us.
Absolutely. You can contact us on Twitter at the Mixed Reviews. Sorry. Facebook, we're the Mixed Reviews.
Mm-hmm.
You can email us at reviewsmixed@gmail.com. And if you want to find a place to subscribe to us, we are on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, and currently we're up on SoundCloud, which I think only still has 2 episodes up because there's a length limit, and I'm cheap.
Same.
But yeah, and also at those all those places, I'm pretty sure you can leave a review or a like, and please do that because that helps other people find us.
Yeah, guys, do that.
Just expand the audience.
Leave us some nice notes.
And if you have a suggestion as to an actor or director or filmmaker, when I say actor, by the way, I mean the universal term that includes actresses. I'm trying to be inclusive.
If you have a suggestion for how Gavin can get better at saying people's names, send them our way.
No, that's never going to happen, sadly. You should hear me speak Spanish. It is white boy to the max.
No gracias.
De nada. No? Not right? Limpiar la biblioteca.
Gavin, wow.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, guys. We will see you in 2 weeks.
Who leaves the sea for you to find?